Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on trust and transparency, and especially focused on the recommendations that we can give to SMEs on the matter. The reason why we're doing this webinar today is because the DFS, in collaboration with Esade and the Institute of Social Innovation, is launching a report on this topic, on trust and transparency, especially addressed to SMEs. I'd like to first of all welcome Cristina Coulomb. Cristina Coulomb is an economist that has developed her professional career in the fields of corporate communication, marketing, brand and reputation, media and crisis management. She combines extensive experience in multilateral organizations such as the European Commission and the UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, along with a long career in both the public administration and large corporations such as the international company Shell. And she is currently the director of the Digital Future Society program at the Mobile World Capital Foundation. Welcome, Cristina.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. And as you were saying, thank you everybody for joining us in this session, this digital session. I'm delighted to participate in this session together with Sarah and Liliana, and to present a very interesting report, very useful report called Building a Trustworthy Digital Business and Recommendations for Small and Medium Enterprises. I wanted to first thank Esade Institute for Social Innovation for having become a key partner for us in developing this specific project, and the outstanding effort that both Liliana and Sarah have carried out as coordinators of this research, but also thank the different companies that accepted to be interviewed so that we could really build business cases or best practices to showcase them to small and medium enterprises. And also the different large number of students that I'm aware they were part of the scouting and the selection of those final 10 inspirational companies that, as I said, became those business cases. And last but not least, in my list of thanks, of course, the Civic Lab team in Digital Future Society, and especially Natalia Gosdur, who's been involved in the development of this initiative, but also because she pushes for having digital trust and security as a critical pillar in Digital Future Society. Allow me very, very briefly explain what Digital Future Society is all about. If you think about your daily activity, you will see there is always an impact created or set up due to technology, disruptive technology and innovation. If you think about the workplace, or if you think about the education of your children, or if we think about the way we share data, or even the way we consume energy, all these fields have an impact that it comes from this disruptive technology or innovation. I might say that perhaps some years ago, we were more focusing on those technological advances and this progress in society, but perhaps we were less focused on the impact it was having in our quality of life. And this is why then the Mobile World Capital Foundation decided to set up this program, Digital Future Society, which counts with the support of the Spanish Ministry of Economic Affairs and Digital Transformation. And the aim of this program is basically to draw a sustainable, a more inclusive, and a fair digital future society for us all. I know it's quite an ambition, but I think we are getting there. We are heading towards that specific goal. And I believe that basically, for us and for Digital Future Society, we strongly believe that trust and transparency are no longer an option, for companies. I think we really need to make an effort that those values that some companies are having already on their DNA of the company, rather than being something rare, is something more normal and in our daily life. Already in 2019, we set up a working group in Digital Future Society on digital trust and security. And one of the areas of research was basically to explore this new emerging business model, these new players in the market that, as I said, their core principles were basically about trust, privacy, and transparency. We drafted a report. It was more targeting the public authorities with specific recommendations so that how we could foster a privacy-first model or environment for companies, for all type of companies. But we wanted to go to a more pragmatical approach, more practical approach. Why? Because we wanted to create a better environment for small and medium enterprises to realize that that was important, that that was relevant, and how could they become privacy-first companies as well. As the initial report we did it. In order to do that, we needed to go through a very in-depth analysis. We need to know who was behind those companies, what challenges they were facing, what sort of financing structure they were dealing with, the scope, the reach. We need to know a lot more, and especially so that we could have those guidance, as I was saying, for small and medium enterprises. And you may think those companies are very few. And it's probably true if you look at the market share of what the space these companies, these privacy-first companies occupy as of today. But there is one figure in the report that I like to highlight, and it says that 60% of internet users are concerned about the way companies are treating their personal data. 60%, 60. I think it's a relevant figure. And that makes me think there is definitely space to grow. There's a space for companies either that needs to be created or already existing companies that needs to go towards a more privacy-first model. It might be a challenge. I'm sure it's everything but easy to become a privacy-first company, but I'm sure that at least a report such as the one that we are presenting today can become a toolkit, a real useful tool for small and medium enterprises, at least to focus and rethink what they want to share and how they want to do it with their consumers or their customers. And hopefully this is a way to do it. So with that, thanks, Sarah, for just passing me the moment to talk. I will go back to you and to Liliana for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you, the DFS, for giving Esade and the Institute for Social Innovation the chance to be partners, to collaborate in this outstanding and very relevant work that you're doing in reflecting reflecting around the ethical dilemmas that technological evolution is presenting both to businesses and to governments. And now I'd like to give the word to Liliana Arroyo. Liliana Arroyo is a PhD in sociology and an expert in digital innovation and social impact. She joined the Institute for Social Innovation in 2016, where she has coordinated a couple of reports on digital social innovation, particularly focusing on platforms with positive impact. And the most recent one is the one that has the name My Data, My Rules, from data extractivism to digital empowerment. Hello, Liliana, and welcome to the webinar. We're happy to hear about the content of the report that we're launching today.
Thank you, Syria, and thank you, Christina, and all DFS for inviting us to join this adventure. It's my pleasure to be sharing with you, like in a few slides, what's the contain. So what the report is bringing on the table. And as Christina was saying, this report is basically justified by the contextual situation regarding how privacy concerns have been rising. As you might already know, in 2018, TechLash was the word of the year after, you remember, Cambridge Analytica scandal and so on. Also, this statistic that Christina was highlighting, which was offered by the Edelman Trust Barometer. But also, we actually know that after this pandemic and the lockdowns, our digital experience has changed, and our concern and our awareness about what companies are doing with our personal data is even more important than before, than when we started this project. So basically, it's this discomfort in response to surveillance capitalism. We have found some initiatives. I will explain you a little bit more in a minute, but you can imagine companies, SMEs, or big corporations that are responding to surveillance capitalism, either from an anti-GAFA movement, and GAFA standing for Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon, Microsoft, Netflix, and others that we could be adding to. But this idea of overcoming this digital economy, which is based in a winner-takes-it-all scheme. Also, there are new narratives about the value of data that are advocating for fair data economy and non-financial rewards of data. So not only thinking about data as a way to monetize it, and then also aspects related to digital sovereignty, for instance, breaking down data silos. So some social movements are starting to quest to what extent it's needed that our data is stored in silos in just a few hands. So as a premise, we understand in this report, Building a Trustworthy Digital Business, the main proposition is that there must be transparency within the system to help rekindle trust in the data economy, and particularly to avoid opaque practices by big corporations. And by this, we mean that transparency and trust are values, but they are not actually at this very same level. But the need is that we need to reestablish trust on digital economy, and a way to do it, a potential avenue to rekindle this trust, is basing our business models in transparency. So the scope of the report, as you see here in the screen, is to offer inspirations. Christina was also mentioning this. So we have chosen 10 international best practices, 10 real-life examples that have been working for a while now. And we're using them as inspiration. So they are case studies, but in a slightly different way. After learning from these 10 inspirations, we have come with a set of reflections and takeaways. And here I would like to emphasize this idea that we have not just compared the case studies, but what we have been doing is to extract their lessons learned and put them in a way, present them in a way that can be enhancing for others to join it. And for this reason, we have basically avoided the hero narrative, what we call the hero narrative, or we have not only reflected about the success, but we have also taken a journey perspective, because we understand that success, it's a process, and pivoting many times, it's part of this process as well. So as you see, we are trying to build an empathetic report for SMEs that are trying to start in it, or that they are already struggling with the journey. So that's basically the scope. And as you will see in a minute, we have chosen international examples, but we think that this report is particularly interesting for those SMEs that are based in Europe, by the simple reason that they are sharing a common framework regarding data protection, so that the GDPR is harmonizing all them, and also in terms of social, legal, political, and financial circumstances. And that being said, I would like to start presenting you with the next slide. I would like to highlight which are the cases that we have selected, and you can see here the logos and the names of the company. We have 10 of them, 10 inspirations. And you can see that we have a wide range of functionalities because we have used lessons learned by companies that are offering software solutions, but also personal data stores or cloud services that are increasing a lot these days. Also a web search engine, tools for communicating across corporations or people, also mobility, which is an important sector, and last but not the least, also payment services. So these are the 7 functionalities that we have been overcoming. And for all these companies, what we have been doing is to offer a general overview, like demographics of the company, mission, vision, values, and so on. But then we have focused particularly on their proposal for trust and transparency. And we have also paid attention to their economic sustainability and viability. Because one thing that we have learned with many case studies that we have been doing in our academic trajectories is that good ideas, there are many, many good ideas that can be useful and that can be inspirational. But when we are offering a set of tools and recommendations, what we need is facts. And for this reason, we have done very complex scouting with students and along with Sira for being sure that these examples that we are presenting you today and that you can find later on in the report, these cases are real life examples. And by real life, we mean that they are profitable and that they are financially viable, which we think that it's really important. And this leads me to explain you a little bit more about the business models. And this is the table that you're seeing on the screen at the moment. And first of all, you will find that we have defined the approach of these corporations, of if they are B2B or B2C or even B2B2C, which is something more and more common in the platform economy, or another novelty, which is peer-to-peer, okay? Connecting users and doing matching between needs and resources. So basically what we have found is that they are relying on 6 business models that none of them are relying on monetization of data. And this is an important principle that we will see in a while as well. So the first model, you are quite familiar with it if you are using, for instance, video and streaming platforms, which are free or freemium models, right? So if you're a user, you're a customer, you can get access to the content or the service, the product, whatever, for free for certain functionalities and for certain privileges. And if you want more or you want to extend your capacity to use it, then you can move towards a freemium scheme where there are pricing models. The second one is, and sorry, this is, as you see, is the more common in the B2C column with MyDex, Quant, Cozy Cloud, and Mico, okay? MyDex and Mico are personal data ecosystems, and we can explain something more about this later on in the Q&A section if someone is willing to. Then we have Quant, which is a French search engine, which is privacy enhancing. And we also have Cozy Cloud, cozy.io, as you see here, is a cloud service like Amazon or Dropbox or what others you may know. The second option is the one-off payment, like first subscription payment, which is the case for Threema, basically. It's quite unique in this scenario that we have been analyzing, and they are using it for B2B and also for B2C solutions. Then we have the third business model, which is subscription-based and also relying on price plans. And of course, these are depending on the service or product, but again, never they are using data as a commodity, which is an important aspect for trust and transparency here. Then we have commission based on conversion rates, like for instance, those that are earning for every click on certain address. And by this, we mean that it's possible to develop digital business models that are relying on advertising, but that they are not monetizing data itself, but normally what they do is to monetize access to that data or information. We'll see more in a minute as well. Another scheme for commission-based digital businesses or revenue streams, they are based on usage. Like you may be familiar with BlaBlaCar example. For instance, they are charging to the consumers or users according to the duration of the ride. Okay, they pay a certain amount. And last but not the least, we also have project-based contracts developing use cases and test beds, which is very, very common in the startup ecosystems, and you might already be familiar with all this. And that being said, now that we have our companies presented, I think that we can move on. And in the next slide, we're going to introduce the strategies for trust and transparency. As you see, here are more than strategies, are the principles that they are that most of the companies have shown to have underpinning their conception, not only in terms of business model, but you will see that here we're also speaking about their vision. Okay, I will go very quick over all of them, but I would like to give you some hints and some examples on how companies are understanding these principles. So the first one is, as we have been mentioning already, is how to rethink the monetization of data. And one hint that I gave you is that instead of monetizing access to data itself, you can monetize, instead of monetizing data itself, you can monetize access to that data. Okay, and another way to rethink this monetization of data is, why don't you empower the individuals that are using your platform? And this is the scheme of MICO, where they are not monetizing data without the individual users. So as MICO is offering a personal data ecosystem, and for being easy to understand, you can imagine like a data wallet, as we have a money wallet. You can imagine data wallets where you can store your data, and from there you can manage, and you can give your consensus and your consent according to certain circumstances. So MICO is offering this platform for personal data ecosystems, and what they do is that they are not monetizing any data that the individual is not monetizing as well. So it's a proposal for a personal data economy where the individual is earning money directly from sharing their data. The second principle or strategy would be practicing data minimization, and this makes sense after 10 years or more than 10 years, 20 years, working under the conception that the more data you have, the better you can be using it, okay? And basically, these companies are advocating for data minimalism, and it's not only a matter of building trust and then it's easier to create transparency the less data you are collecting, but it's also a matter of security. So the less data you are gathering, the less data you need to take care of, okay? And the less compromised are your potential leaks, let's frame it like that, okay? So data minimalism basically advocates for gathering limited data collection, or for instance, using random IDs whenever is possible. And here we have a couple of examples. One of them is Quant, this French search engine I was explaining before, which their business model is based on advertising. So they are following the the click per view premise, but they do not use cookies nor collect any kind of personal information. So how does it work? Well, as long as you are looking for a specific term or specific product, they know what your interest is already. And what they do is to serve you ads based on the contextual search that you are making. But they are not relating these results to all the history or all the history searches that you have been creating in there. And we can follow and we can move on to the third one, which is offering privacy and enhancing solutions. That basically, we have here examples of Threema. Threema is, I don't think I've explained it before, but Threema basically it's a kind of WhatsApp, but it's a direct messaging service, but it's quite privacy enhancing. And for instance, what they are doing is that they are using random IDs, and it's only it's only your responsibility if you want to link it to your personal info or not, because it's optional. And the same with Satispay, which they define themselves, it's an Italian payment platform between peers, and they describe themselves as the WhatsApp of payments. And the same with Satispay. So you just need to give your ID, a random ID, or your number, your phone number, and your IBAN account, and that's it. They don't even need your name or whatever, right? And also in this case, we also have the example of Datina. Datina, it's a company based in Singapore, and part of the team that was founding this company, they were involved in the Swiss leaks. So they were investigating the first or the most important bank leak of data bank leak in Switzerland, and they realized how important it was to find a solution that helped companies to identify, classify, and protect sensitive information. So this is what they do as well. The fourth is partnering wisely, and because this journey towards trust and transparency, it's something that it's affecting every single company in the digital economy. And this is something that you cannot do alone, most probably. So you can start your journey alone, but at some point you will need to partner with others. Or as we have seen for some companies, what they did, it was at the beginning, for instance, they were transitioning towards this model, but the quicker wins they could get were through partnerships with other corporations. For instance, you can create among others a community of trust and create networks around them, or maybe you can have an active role in partnerships for offering complementary products. And here we have an example of Quant. They are partnering with Brave, which is a browser, which is also French, and it's also privacy enhancing. So you can reinforce your values if your partners are also in this trust and transparency mindset. You can also establish research partnerships, and Element AI, it's really strong in this point. Or we can also move towards bigger movements like the BlaBlaCar with the acquisitions. And they have adopted acquisitions as a growth strategy. Of course, every SME is in a different stage of the journey. But these are some examples that you can think of. Another important aspect for transparency is keeping solutions open and of course transparent. And here the important case we have is the Red Hat, because Red Hat was the pioneer in 1996, so even before Google, let's say. They were pioneering in the field of open source software. And basically, this is known as the Red Hat business model, because their business model is not based on data, or it's not based on licensing a specific software. It's more based on the associated services. So, for instance, how can we adapt this open source code to your specific needs or your specific requirements according to what you need? So keeping solutions open and transparent is also an important aspect. And last but not the least, this idea of protecting the core vision. And all those of you who are working for a startup or that have launched one, or you are thinking about launching one, protecting the core vision, it's quite critical, because when you develop your financial plan and when you develop your business model and your revenue streams at the beginning, this can be changed as soon as venture capital opportunities arrive. So we have also seen examples with Mydex or Miko or Threema. These three companies have a very specific, the particular ways to avoid sacrificing their core vision for return on investment. And for instance, Mydex, what they did is that they signed up as a SIC company, so community interest company, which is a legal figure that you can find in the UK. It's not really in every European country, but it's the idea of how can you protect this core vision. Or for instance, Miko, they have a clause when they sign with venture capitalists, they have a clause which states that they cannot, so the funder has a protective contract. And basically, in order to never sacrifice the concept for value, investors cannot kick the founder out in order to make more money. So they can kick her out, they can fire her in case, in other cases, but not for the sake of gaining profitability. And I think that I'm almost out of my time. So the first slide is basically dedicated to the recommendations. I'm not going to go through all of them because you can read them in the report, but let me highlight a couple of aspects. So one is that these recommendations are not conceived as a checklist. These recommendations are conceived as an invitation to take on a journey, and every of these 8 recommendations is expressed in different levels. So we have differentiated those aspects that are for basic and for those who are starting, or for those who are in an advanced stages, for instance, establishing a mission or thinking about the business model, etc. So the highlights that I would like to make here are 2. One is related to recommendation number 4. And it's important that you think about the business model as a design issue, not only as a way of earning money. And you need to be sure that your core vision is incorporated across the whole business model and the whole revenue streams that you are offering. And the key is to introduce built-in incentives for that. And last but not the least, I would say recommendation number 8. It's one of the most commented, advices that have appeared in our interviews, and basically it's never give up, because pivoting 1,000 times is the only road to success. And I think that I can leave it here because we would like to have time for the Q&A, I guess. So thank you, and Sira, I get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Liliana. Just to add one final reflection around the report that is being launched today. When we were doing the research, it was very interesting to see how the level of concern around digital control and lack of transparency among citizens was very different depending on the profile of the person. On the one hand, we saw how Generation Z, so young people, were not really concerned on digital control and on how companies could use their data, because in a way they perceive that they have nothing to hide, no, and that we aren't necessarily free as we are today, so it doesn't really matter, no. But on the other hand, we saw how older generations, older than Generation Z, and especially people who have fought for human rights years ago, they are we are very concerned on how digital control can have an impact on human rights, no? And also those who have, in a way, suffered some bad experiences around digital control. And that, together with some governments, especially Europe, are concerned on how companies can have an impact on our privacy. And so if what we have perceived is that if we believe that fighting for human rights and taking into account our right to privacy as one of them, in that regard, there are several, let's say, several factors that will be important for the future to be more transparent and trustworthy from that perspective. On the one hand, we believe that all of us as consumers, we have a say in that, in the sense that we can push for more transparency when we as users, when we hire services, we are favoring companies that are in that regard more trustworthy and more transparent. But also when we are working for companies, employees can also have a say in that. And there are examples like Google employees in Silicon Valley complaining about Google entering China or having business in China, and had that being in conflict with the don't do evil motto. So we as consumers, we as potential employees, but then also governments and legislators, be it from a national or supranational level, they have a lot to say, and then they can push transparency and trustworthiness forward. And finally, capital. If capital starts to favor and take into account companies that are doing best practices in terms of trustworthiness and transparency, that will also help more companies receive incentives to act better from that regard. But these would be for external factors. We also have to take into account internal factors, meaning what internal incentives do companies have to push that forward? And in that sense, we believe that on the one hand, companies might want to incorporate those considerations from a passive perspective, meaning that they simply want to sleep peacefully and not have remorse in terms of negative practices they might be pushing forward from that perspective. But from a more active perspective, we might also consider that companies might want to just be part of the solution, no? And try to help make this world more livable. But then even from a more active perspective, we believe that there might be companies interested in putting into practice Richard Thaler's the Nobel Prize of Economy theory on nudging for good. So this idea that companies and top managers might be interested in considering their consumers almost as friends and as people they care for. And in that sense, people they want to protect and therefore not abuse in terms of the data that they might have access to. And finally, it's as simple as maybe the fact that maybe some bad practices have to do with the fact that many companies have ignored, simply didn't know how to be better in terms of trustworthiness and transparency. And that's why we believe that publishing a report like this one can be very helpful in the sense that it provides best cases, examples of on how small and medium companies can push trustworthiness and transparency forward. And that's why we invite you all to read the report. But now moving to a short Q&A session. So we, for example, we're receiving one question for Liliana. Someone is asking us, so imagine that I need to convince my CEO to rethink our business model. Where do you think, Liliana, should the CEO start?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good one, because sometimes we find this, right, that maybe there are employees that, as you were saying, in the case of Google, their employees are convinced of the need to reshift or rethought the business model. I think that we have been pointing out many different aspects, and if the case of this person, if this SME is based in the European context, I would say that first, there are legal incentives. So as I was saying, the GDPR, but also the Payment Service Directive number 2, which is very clear in this sense as well. But also we have all the privacy concerns that are raising since Snowden revelations, but also, as we were saying before, so Techlash was the word of the year in 2018. And now with the pandemic, we have also seen that the population is concerned about contact tracing apps, for instance, and they are not trusting either companies or governments. So we need to reestablish this trust. But that being said, we have also found that for these companies, being trustworthy and being transparent is more profitable than not being it. So it's not only a matter of responsibility, but it's also a matter of opportunity. And another aspect that many companies were highlighting is that as long as you can anticipate a bit what are the next concerns about data, the easiest you can position your organization in there. And another I would say another good advice was to think, not thinking first the solution and then taking it for granted that it's a very good idea and that it will be successful, but always focus on who can pay for it. And I would say that 90% of the cases that we have been analyzing, first of all, they were developing solutions for companies, solutions or products for companies rather than for individuals, because companies normally have more incentives to be investing money in this kind of solutions. Hope this is helpful for
Sure.
convincing the CEO.
Thank you, Liliana. So we have this other question. Someone is asking again for you, Liliana, and I have another question for Christina that will come next. Liliana, so they're asking us if there are any particular elements within organizational culture that would help when transitioning to a more transparent and trustworthy model.
Yes, that's quite relevant, because what we have found is that all these companies have one thing in common, which is the internal-external consistency. So as long as they are trustworthy and transparent for the public, they are also trustworthy and transparent for their own employees and for their own teams. So I wouldn't claim that there is a specific organizational culture that can help the transition to this model or to organize around this mindset. But definitely, I would say that all these companies that have been moving towards these trustworthy solutions or proposals, value proposals, definitely they are also incorporating the employees and the employee voices in the solutions they are delivering. And by this I mean that the structures tend to be flatter than others, and also that the engagement in decision making by the whole company, so the whole members of the company, it's quite relevant. And I really recommend in regarding this, I really recommend the Red Hat documentary. You can find it, I mean, it's publicly available on YouTube. And they explain the Red Hat model. They are more than 10,000 employees distributed across the world, but they have managed to have a participatory culture within. The same participatory culture they have, relying on external developers that are working on their open source code.
Thank you, Liliana. Very helpful. And now we have one question for Christina. So someone is asking us, what can governments do to support these emerging business models?
Yeah, very important. As I said at the beginning, we draft an initial report that actually was targeting public bodies. And some suggestions or recommendations we made for the public authorities is that we need to have some type of certifications so that it raises awareness of these new business models, but it also builds more trust as users or consumers of any of those products or services coming from privacy-first companies. How can I know that they are doing what they just say, just because they claim this transparency or this privacy? So definitely some sort of a certification should be at least one of the areas that they should go for. Another one would be public procurement. As we know, public bodies have an important part of their activities done through procurement, and we should try to incentivize or at least put some type of criteria for public, privacy-first companies to participate in those public procurement just because of the type of companies they are. And a third one we identified was to create or foster a network of privacy-first incubators in order to generate or foster this type of model. So those were at least some of the guidelines we would say governments could start placing in order to foster this more privacy-first environment.
Thank you, Christina. And now just to finalize, and out of curiosity, Christina, has the COVID had any impact on your future programs, plans, and what you will be doing in the coming months or years, and where will you put your focus on?
Definitely it has. I would say, leaving aside, of course, the impact of the crisis that is having, I would say, in any angle of our life as we speak, if we try to have a positive read in digital future society, the consequence of COVID has been that it has accelerated the relevance of our agenda. And what I mean by that is that I believe we had already identified critical pillars in order to build that more inclusive and more sustainable agenda, as I was mentioning. But now, if you look around, the way we are all working remotely, at least the ones we can, or the digital gap or digital divide that is being increased in this crisis, even on the basics of connectivity and access, or the way we share data, as we just explained very much in detail from Liliana in the report. Those were critical pillars already in our agenda. What has happened with COVID is that they have become more predominant and more relevant. So there is a higher debate, but we just don't want to go on to the debate, which is definitely needed. We need to have this debate, but also there is a pressure to find more solutions and deeper solutions on those areas.
Thank you, Christina. Well, I want to be mindful of the time, so I will say thank you, Liliana, for sharing the insights of the report with all of us today. Thank you, Christina, again for giving Esade and the Institute for Social Innovation to give us the chance to collaborate with you and be part of this very relevant work that you are doing. And for the audience, you will have the link available on YouTube and also within the platforms of the Digital Future Society and the Institute for Social Innovation. We encourage you all to take a look at it and be inspired for your businesses on how to make future a bit more trustworthy and transparent. And with that, we hope you're all well and take care. Bye. Thank you.